Get off the aircraft. Now, or you will be removed in handcuffs." The captain's voice detonated through the cabin speakers, sharp and absolute, cutting through the low murmur of first class like a blade through silk. Conversations died mid-sentence. A champagne flute trembled in a manicured hand. Somewhere, a seatbelt chimed, unanswered, camera-wide, the front of the plane. Seat 1. Oh, Olivia Carter did not move. She sat upright, shoulders squared, hands resting flat on her thighs. Calm, almost unnervingly so. The kind of stillness that wasn't surrender but calculation. Her hoodie was charcoal grey, soft with age, the cuffs faintly frayed. Black leggings, worn sneakers, no jewelry, no makeup. Her hair pulled back into a loose, practical knot that suggested exhaustion more than neglect. She looked like someone you'd step around in a terminal, someone invisible. Captain Mark Reynolds stood in the aisle, blocking the path like a wall. Late 50s. Broad chest stretched tight under his uniform. 4 gold stripes on his sleeve caught the cabin lights. His jaw was clenched, eyes hard, already past patience. He wasn't here to discuss. He was here to end something. "Ma'am," he said again, louder now. "This is your final warning." The word warning hung heavy, loaded. Behind him, Lauren Mitchell hovered half a step back, hands clasped at her waist, posture immaculate. 35. Perfectly pressed uniform. Smile gone. What replaced it was something colder. Satisfaction, maybe. Or relief. The problem was no longer hers. Across the aisle, Bradley Knox leaned back in his seat, long legs stretched, one ankle resting casually on his knee. 47. Navy bespoke suit, gold watch catching the light every time he shifted. He watched Olivia the way one watches a stain being scrubbed out of carpet. Mild curiosity. Detached amusement. He took a slow sip of champagne and smirked. "About time," he muttered, not quite under his breath. Olivia lifted her eyes. Not to the captain, not to Lauren. She looked straight at Bradley. Her gaze was steady, unreadable. No anger, no fear, just focus. She held it for a beat too long. Bradley's smile faltered, just slightly. He looked away first. Captain Reynolds exhaled sharply. He didn't like the silence, didn't like that she hadn't scrambled, apologized, begged. That was how this usually went. "Ma'am," he said, voice dropping into the tone he used with subordinates. "You are disrupting my aircraft. You will gather your belongings and step off. Voluntarily. Or airport police will assist you." Olivia reached up slowly, deliberately, and slid her noise-cancelling headphones down around her neck. The small motion felt enormous in the quiet cabin. Plastic against fabric. A click as they settled. "Why?" she asked. One word. Flat. Controlled. Captain Reynolds blinked. He hadn't expected a question. He glanced back at Lauren, who leaned in, whispering quickly, her voice tight with urgency. "She's refusing crew instructions. She threatened me earlier. Said she'd take this airline down. We can't let her stay." A lie, clean, confident. Olivia turned her head toward Lauren. Their eyes met. Lauren's chin lifted a fraction, defensive now. She had already decided who Olivia was, already written the story. The hoodie, the shoes, the quiet. In Lauren's mind, this woman didn't belong here, and people who didn't belong were problems to be solved. "I didn't threaten you," Olivia said calmly. "I asked to sit in the seat I paid for." Bradley let out a short laugh. A few passengers joined in, nervous, eager to align with the man who looked like he mattered. "Paid for," Bradley repeated, shaking his head. "With what?" "Pocket change. You people always try this." The phrase landed like a slap. "You people." Several heads turned. Some faces tightened. Others looked away, suddenly very interested in the pattern of the carpet. Olivia felt the heat rise in her chest, sharp and bright, but she kept her voice level. "I have a valid boarding pass. Seat 1A, priority boarding. Federal law states that once a passenger is seated, they cannot be removed unless they pose a safety threat. Am I a threat, Captain?" Captain Reynolds's face flushed. He was not accustomed to being quoted regulations, especially not by women who looked like they should be grateful just to be on the plane. "You're becoming a threat by refusing to comply," he snapped. "This is my aircraft." Behind him, Lauren nodded quickly, eager. "She's aggressive." She made other passengers uncomfortable. "Uncomfortable," Bradley echoed, gesturing vaguely at Olivia. "Look at her. I don't feel safe flying next to someone like that." Camera close on Olivia's hands. Still, steady, nails short, clean. No tremor. She could feel it now. The shift. The moment where this stopped being about a seat and became something older, uglier. The calculation happening behind their eyes. The assumptions stacking, one on top of another, forming a verdict before evidence ever entered the room. Captain Reynolds turned his head toward the cockpit. "Get airport police up here. Level 2 non-compliance. Level 2. The words rippled through the cabin. That meant force. That meant paperwork. That meant headlines if anyone bothered to look. A young couple in row 3 lifted their phones, not subtly. Red recording lights blinked to life. Olivia noticed. She met the woman's eyes and gave the smallest nod. "Thank you," without saying it. She leaned back slightly in her seat, keeping her hands visible, open. A posture she'd learned long ago. Non-threatening. Cooperative without yielding ground. "I'm not moving," she said. "You are discriminating against me based on appearance and another passenger's preference. That is unlawful. That is a—" Captain Reynolds laughed, short and sharp. "Ma'am, save it for your lawyer." Footsteps echoed from the jet bridge. Heavy, purposeful. Officer Daniel Moore boarded first. 32. Broad shoulders, new boots that squeaked faintly against the aisle floor. His hand rested near his cuffs out of habit. Behind him, another officer, older, eyes tired. They took in the scene in a second. The captain, the flight attendant, the well-dressed man in first class, and the woman in the hoodie. Officer Moore didn't ask for context. He pointed. "You. Seat 1A. Stand up." Olivia looked up at him. Her heart was pounding now, loud in her ears. but her voice remained even. "I have the right to remain seated. I am not resisting. I am asserting my rights." Officer Moore grabbed her arm. It happened fast, fingers digging into muscle, a sharp intake of breath as pain flared up her shoulder. Papers spilled from her canvas bag, sliding across the carpet. A tablet clattered against the bulkhead. Resisting, Officer Moore barked, louder than necessary. "I'm not resisting," Olivia said, breath tight now. "Don't touch me." Captain Reynolds turned away, already done with it. "Get her off my plane." Bradley leaned into the aisle as Olivia was pulled up, his face close to hers now, his voice low and cruel. "Should have known your place," he said. "Enjoy jail." As they dragged her down the aisle, Olivia caught one last glimpse of seat 1A. Empty now, perfectly made, waiting for someone else. At the aircraft door, she twisted just enough to look back. Captain Reynolds was straightening his jacket, smoothing imaginary wrinkles. Lauren stood beside him, pale now, lips pressed tight. The phones were everywhere. The cabin was buzzing, alive with shock. Olivia locked eyes with the captain. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly, "the kind that costs people their careers." He scoffed. "Get her out." The cold air of the jet bridge hit her face. The cuffs closed around her wrists with a sharp metallic click. Final. Public. Olivia Carter did not cry. She lowered her gaze, breathed once, slow and deep, and thought not about humiliation, not about pain, but about consequences. Because they thought this story ended here. They were wrong. The cuffs were too tight. Olivia noticed that first, not the humiliation, not the phone still pointed at her back, not Bradley Knox's satisfied grin shrinking in the distance. Just the pressure of cold metal biting into bone as she was marched down the jet bridge, boots echoing, fluorescent lights flickering overhead like a bad interrogation room. Officer Daniel Moore walked fast. Too fast. His grip never loosened. Every few steps her shoulder screamed, a sharp white flare that made her jaw tighten. She didn't cry out. She wouldn't give him that. "You can relax," she said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere." Moore didn't slow. He didn't look at her. "You people always say that." The older officer trailing behind shifted uncomfortably. He'd seen this before. Different face, same ending. Or so he thought. At the terminal entrance, the air changed, louder, colder. The hum of travelers, rolling bags, boarding announcements bleeding into one another. Heads turned as Olivia was paraded through the concourse. Some stared. Some filmed. Some shook their heads and kept walking, life moving on around a woman being erased in real time. They pushed her into a holding room near gate C14. Grey walls, a bolted metal bench, smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. The door slammed shut with a finality that rang in her ears. Officer Moore removed the cuffs just long enough to push her down onto the bench, then snapped them back on, this time anchored to a steel loop in the wall. He stepped back, chest rising, adrenaline still pumping. "You're being detained for disorderly conduct and trespassing," he said, reciting from muscle memory. "You'll be processed shortly." I wasn't trespassing, Olivia replied. I had a valid ticket. Moore scoffed. Sure you did. He turned and left. The door shut again. The click of the lock echoed longer than it should have. Olivia closed her eyes, not to rest, to think. The pain in her shoulder throbbed now, deep and rhythmic. She rotated it slightly, testing limits, filing information away. Probably a strain. Maybe worse. She'd deal with it later. Right now, she needed timing. She counted her breaths. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. The technique that had carried her through hostile boardrooms, predatory negotiations, rooms full of men. Men who smiled while trying to bleed her dry. Panic was expensive. Control was currency. Footsteps passed outside. Laughter. Someone joked about the crazy lady from first class. Olivia opened her eyes again. Her gaze dropped to her wrist. The watch looked cheap. Black plastic. Scuffed face. The kind of thing you buy at a drugstore because you don't want to lose it. She'd chosen it carefully that morning, swapping it for her Cartier before heading to the airport. Habit. Caution. She pressed the top button once, twice. Bottom button. Held. The screen flickered red. Somewhere far from gate C14, a phone buzzed on a polished mahogany desk. Lucas Bennett was halfway through a late lunch he hadn't tasted when the alert hit. He froze, fork suspended mid-air. The color drained from his face. That signal meant one thing. Olivia never used it unless the situation was already nuclear. He was on his feet before the fork hit the plate, already dialing as he moved. No answer. He didn't expect one. He opened another line, fingers flying. "Get the team," he said into the phone. "Now, and pull up every active contract tied to Skyline Airways, especially ethics clauses. I want everything in front of me in 5 minutes." Back in the holding room, Olivia leaned her head against the wall, eyes open, listening. Her phone was gone, her bag gone. Cut off from the world, she ran. That was fine. She'd built redundancies for this exact reason. Outside, the terminal buzz grew louder. Voices rising. A familiar sound threaded through it now. Phones chiming. Notifications. The ripple effect. At gate B2, the young couple from row 3 stood shoulder to shoulder, hands shaking as they watched the video play back on their screen. The man swallowed hard. "This is bad," he said. The woman nodded, already uploading. No commentary, just the footage. The captain's voice. Bradley's sneer. The officer's hands on Olivia's arm. Truth didn't need embellishment. By the time the upload bar hit 100%, the algorithm had already begun to chew. Back on flight 802, the doors finally closed. Bradley Knox settled deeper into seat 1A, stretching his legs, savoring the space. He accepted another drink from Lauren Mitchell, who smiled too wide, her hands trembling just enough to notice. "Thank you for your patience earlier, sir," she said. "We apologize for the inconvenience." Bradley waved her off. "All good. You handled it." He leaned back, victory humming in his veins. He'd made his point. People like him didn't get challenged by people like her. Order restored. Then his phone buzzed. He frowned. No service indicator flickered, then vanished. He tapped the screen. Nothing. "Huh," he muttered. Lauren glanced down at her handheld device. Her smile faded. She tapped it once, twice almost. The screen stayed black. "That's odd," she said quietly. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds frowned at his console. A warning light blinked, then another. His CO pilot looked up, uneasy. "Captain, we just lost connection to the ground system." Reynolds straightened. "That doesn't happen." The CO pilot's fingers flew across switches. "Just did." At gate C-14, the door to the holding room opened again. A different officer stepped in this time. Sergeant Kowalski, late 40s, graying hair, the look of a man who'd seen enough disasters to recognize the early tremors. "Ms. Carter," he said, reading from a tablet. "Can you confirm your full name?" Olivia lifted her head slowly. "Vivian Carter." Kowalski hesitated. Something flickered across his face. "Recognition, doubt, and your occupation?" Olivia held his gaze. "Chief Executive Officer." He snorted despite himself. "Of what?" She smiled then. Not wide, not smug, just tired. Carter Global Systems. The tablet slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. Kowalski stared at her, mouth opening, closing. He bent slowly to retrieve the device, hands suddenly unsteady. The name glared back at him in bold letters, already flagged, already cross-referenced. "Oh, hell," he whispered. Before he could speak again, his radio crackled violently to life. He jumped. "Sergeant Kowalski, where is she?" A voice barked through the static. "This is Deputy Commissioner Harris." Kowalski swallowed. "In holding, sir." "Get her out, now!" And listen carefully. Every single second she spends in cuffs is another year off your career. The radio went dead. Kowalski looked at Olivia like a man staring at an oncoming train. "Ms. Carter, there's been a mistake." Olivia shifted on the bench, the metal cuffs scraping softly. "No," she said. "There hasn't." The sergeant fumbled with the key, hands shaking as he unlocked the chain from the wall. He didn't meet her eyes. "I'm very sorry," he started. She stood slowly, wincing as her shoulder protested. "Save it." As they stepped back into the terminal, the noise hit them like a wave. People weren't just moving now. They were watching, pointing, whispering. Phones everywhere. Someone shouted her name. "Ms. Carter, is it true?" She kept walking. Across the airport, screens flickered. News alerts crawled along the bottom. A viral video thumbnail froze on Olivia's face as she was dragged down the aisle. The caption underneath was blunt. "Airline removes CEO from first-class seat after dispute. Video sparks outrage." In the cockpit of Flight 802, Captain Reynolds's hands trembled as alarms continued to cascade. His radio screamed with overlapping voices. The words he caught made his blood run cold. Contract breach, ethics clause, immediate suspension, He stared at the door to first class, at seat 1A, now occupied by a man who suddenly looked very small. Bradley Knox finally noticed the shift. The looks, the whispers, his phone buzzed again, then again, lighting up with messages the moment service stuttered back to life. He read the first headline, then the second, then the third. His mouth went dry. Somewhere between the holding room and the exit, Olivia Carter inhaled deeply, feeling the weight begin to shift. Not lift. Shift. The system grinding, resisting, already cracking. This was no longer about a seat. This was about consequence, and it had only just begun. The first lawsuit wasn't filed in a courtroom. It was filed in the air. Olivia felt it before she saw it, the subtle change in pressure, the way the terminal seemed to lean toward her as she walked. Screens flashed, voices sharpened. A low, collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd as her name moved from whispers to headlines. Lucas Bennett met her at the end of the concourse, jacket off, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. 50 years old, steel-eyed, the kind of man who spoke softly because he never needed to raise his voice. He didn't hug her. He didn't apologize. He looked at her shoulder, already swelling under the hoodie, and nodded once. "We're moving," he said. "Where?" Olivia asked. "Anywhere but here." They slipped through a service corridor as the terminal behind them erupted. Reporters surged. Security scrambled. Someone shouted a question that turned into 3, then 10. Lucas held up a hand without breaking stride. Not now. They emerged into a parking bay where a black SUV waited, engine running. The driver didn't look back. The door shut. The world outside dimmed. Olivia leaned back, exhaling for the first time since the cuffs closed. The pain sharpened as adrenaline drained away. She closed her eyes, counting again. Lucas tapped his phone, then slid it toward her. The screen was a cascade of messages, alerts stacking faster than he could read. "It's everywhere," he said. The video crossed 1 million views in under 10 minutes. Civil rights groups picked it up. Transportation oversight is calling. The airline's board is in emergency session. Olivia opened her eyes. And the contract? Lucas's mouth tightened. Clause 14. Reputational harm and ethical breach. We have unilateral termination rights if we choose to invoke. If, she said. He met her gaze. You don't ask that question unless you already know the answer. She looked out the window as the SUV pulled away. The airport receded, a concrete organism convulsing behind glass. She thought of the holding room, the bench, the cuffs, the way Officer Moore had said, "You people." The words had stuck, barbed. "Invoke it," she said. Lucas nodded and typed one word. Execute. Across the city, in a tower of brushed steel and glass, the executive floor of Skyline Airways went silent. Phones rang unanswered. Screens blinked, then went black. In Dallas, the chief operations officer stared at his monitor as a single line of text appeared, stark and merciless. Access denied. Vendor services suspended under ethics clause. He felt his knees weaken. "Get IT on the line," he barked. "They already are," someone said from behind him. All lines are down. On the tarmac in Newfoundland, Flight 802 touched down hard. Not planned, not smooth. The landing gear screamed as it hit frozen runway. Passengers gasped. The cabin shook. Captain Reynolds gripped the yoke, sweat slicking his palms. His instruments were half blind now. Data feeds gone. He breathed through his nose, forcing calm. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, and the confidence was gone. "This is the captain. We are experiencing a system-wide disruption. We have been instructed to divert and hold." Bradley Knox lurched forward in his seat. "What does that mean?" "It means sit down," someone snapped from behind him. Bradley ignored them, fumbling for his phone. No service. Again. He felt the first real flicker of fear. Back in the SUV, Olivia's phone buzzed as Lucas handed it to her. A call from an unknown number. He shook his head. Not yet. She watched the city blur past. Billboards, overpasses. The ordinary world, indifferent. She thought of the engineers she'd hired, the systems they'd built, the redundancies, the kill switches everyone had insisted were unnecessary. "Let the system do what it was designed to do," she said quietly. Lucas smiled without humor. "It already is." At Skyline headquarters, the CEO, Raymond Hale, stared at the conference room wall as his board shouted over one another. 56. Silver hair. Perfect teeth. The man who believed numbers could outrun morality. "Get her on the phone," he demanded. "We tried," someone said. "Her counsel says she's unavailable." "Unavailable," Hale barked. "She shut down half our operation." A junior analyst burst in, pale. "Sir, the FAA just grounded our fleet. Without the vendor tracking data, we're non-compliant." The room went dead. In the air over the Atlantic, Flight 802 sat cold on the tarmac. Heat sputtered, lights dimmed. The aisle filled with raised voices. Lauren Mitchell clutched her jump seat, face ashen. Her handheld device was dead weight now. She watched Bradley pace, shouting into a useless phone, his composure cracking piece by piece. "This is insane," he yelled. "I have meetings. People are waiting on me." No one answered. Someone near the window laughed, sharp and bitter. "Should have thought about that before you opened your mouth." Bradley spun. "What did you say?" The man didn't flinch. "I said you look cold. Might want to hug that cello." A ripple of laughter spread, low and dangerous. Bradley shrank back, suddenly aware of how alone he was. In the SUV, Olivia's phone rang again. Lucas nodded this time. She answered. "Miss Carter," a voice said, too formal, too fast. "This is Commissioner Harris with Airport Authority. There's been a grave misunderstanding." Olivia closed her eyes. "No," she said. "There hasn't." "We are prepared to issue a public apology," Harris rushed on. "Immediate corrective action. Reinstatement of services. We ask that you reconsider." "Reconsider what?" Olivia cut in. "Being treated like a threat for sitting in a seat I paid for?" Silence. She leaned forward slightly, voice low, controlled. "You will conduct a full investigation. Names, timelines, accountability. and you will do it publicly." "Yes, ma'am," Harris said. She ended the call. Lucas watched her, impressed despite himself. "You know they'll try to settle." She nodded. "Of course they will." "And?" She looked out the window again. "Let them." At a precinct downtown, Officer Daniel Moore sat alone in a break room, staring at his phone as notification after notification flooded in. His name was everywhere now. His face, his badge number. He remembered her eyes. Calm, steady. The way she'd said, "I'm not resisting." The way he hadn't listened. His supervisor's voice echoed in his head. "Why didn't you ask questions?" He didn't have an answer. Back in the SUV, Olivia felt the weight finally begin to lift, replaced by something colder. Resolve. The kind that didn't shake. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. They pulled into a secure building on the edge of the city. Glass, concrete, quiet. Lucas opened the door. "Welcome back," he said. She stepped out, the air sharp against her skin. Inside, a command room glowed. Screens mapped the world in lines and nodes, flights blinking out one by one. A system breathing, obeying. An engineer looked up, eyes wide. "Ms. Carter." Olivia nodded. "Status?" 98% of Skyline systems are offline, he said. "Remaining services will fail within the hour." She absorbed it. "Good." Lucas leaned in. "Hale is calling again." She didn't look away from the screens. "Let it ring." Outside, the world argued about her. Commentators debated. Strangers took siduls. Some called her ruthless. Others called her a hero. Olivia Carter stood at the center of it, hoodie still on, shoulder aching, eyes clear. They had dragged her off a plane, thinking she was nobody. They were about to learn how wrong that assumption could be. Raymond Hale watched his world fracture in real time. The screens in the executive conference room glowed with maps and metrics that no longer made sense. Flights blinking out, routes graying over. The pulse of an airline going flat. He stood at the head of the table, palms braced on polished wood, breathing through his nose as if breath alone could restore control. "Get her back on the line," he said. "Now." The general counsel shook her head, eyes red. "She won't take the call. Her attorney says all communication will be in writing." Hale laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "In writing." He straightened his jacket, smoothed the lapel like a man preparing to be seen. "Then write it. Offer everything. Apology. Compensation. Whatever she wants." In the command room across town, Olivia Carter watched the same maps from a different angle. Here, the screens were alive with purpose. Engineers moved with quiet urgency. No shouting, no panic. Just execution. She stood with her weight balanced carefully to spare her shoulder, hoodie unzipped now, breath steady. The room smelled faintly of ozone and coffee. 99%, an engineer said. "Final dependencies dropping." Olivia nodded. "Hold." Lucas Bennett hovered a step back, phone in hand. "Hale's team just sent an offer. Full public apology. Immediate settlement. They'll reinstate any passenger privileges. They're asking for restoration of services within the hour. She didn't turn. Passenger privileges, she repeated softly, like a coupon. Lucas waited. He knew better than to rush her. She thought of the jet bridge, the cold air, the cuffs clicking shut, the word trespassing, the way Captain Reynolds had straightened his jacket as she was dragged away, the way Lauren Mitchell's eyes had flicked to the phones, then away. "Write them back," Olivia said. "Keep it short." Lucas typed, reading aloud as he went. Receipt acknowledged. Services remain suspended, pending review. Additional terms forthcoming. "Send it," she said. On the tarmac in Newfoundland, the cold had crept into bones. Passengers huddled in coats they hadn't planned to wear. Breath fogged the air. The auxiliary power unit coughed and sputtered, heat coming in uneven waves. Bradley Knox sat rigid in his seat, cello case clutched like a life raft. He stared at his phone as if willing it to apologize. Lauren Mitchell sat across the aisle, knees drawn together, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She'd seen the video now, seen herself from the outside, the way her mouth had set, the way she'd leaned in, voice sharp, eyes certain. She'd told herself it was policy, that it was about order. But the comments scrolling under the video didn't agree. Fire her. Ban him. This is what power looks like. She swallowed and looked away. A man 2 rows back stood and stretched his legs. He glanced at Bradley. "Cold, huh?" he said. "Might want to check if your status gets you a blanket." Bradley didn't answer. He was reading a message from his assistant, the words blurring. "Funds pulled. Call me." Another message arrived before he could respond. "Board meeting emergency. You need to get ahead of this." Ahead of what? He thought, panic tightening his chest. He pictured Olivia's eyes, calm and steady, and felt something shift. Regret came late, unwelcome, and too expensive to matter. In the command room, a new screen lit up. Social feeds, headlines rolling in like tidewater. Airline faces federal inquiry after viral removal of CEO. Ethics clause invoked. Flights grounded nationwide. Lucas whistled softly. "They're bleeding." Olivia watched without satisfaction. This wasn't theatre. It was correction. She turned to the engineer. "Any chance of collateral?" "Minimal," he said. "We isolated to Skyline. Other carriers unaffected." "Good," she said. She had no interest in burning the village. Only the rot. Her phone vibrated. Lucas glanced at it, eyebrows lifting. FAA on line 2. She took the call. The voice on the other end was careful, measured, trained to speak without committing. "Miss Carter, this is Administrator Keller. We are assessing the situation. We need assurances regarding safety and continuity." Olivia looked at the world map. "Safety," she said. "That's exactly the issue. Your regulations require accurate tracking and crew coordination. Skyline violated ethical standards and removed a passenger unlawfully. The systems were suspended accordingly." Safety is preserved. A pause. And continuity. Continuity will resume when accountability is established, she said. Not before. Another pause. Longer this time. Understood, Keller said. We will coordinate. She ended the call and exhaled slowly. Her shoulder throbbed. She ignored it. In Dallas, Raymond Hale's phone rang again. This time he answered on the first ring. Yes. The voice was not conciliatory. It was urgent. Ray, this is the board chair. We're convening without you. The market's reacting. Investors are spooked. We need to show control. Hale felt a cold prickle crawl up his spine. I am in control. A beat. Are you? The line went dead. He sank into his chair and stared at the table. For the first time, the numbers on the wall felt personal. He saw not roots and margins, but faces. A woman in a hoodie, a captain with 4 stripes, a flight attendant with a tight smile, a hedge fund manager with a smirk. He'd believed culture was a memo you sent out, a training module. He'd been wrong. In the command room, Lucas cleared his throat. There's more. Officer Daniel Moore's union issued a statement distancing themselves. Internal Affairs opened a case. The airport authority placed him on administrative leave. Olivia nodded once. And the captain? Reynolds has been grounded pending investigation. Lauren Mitchell suspended. She closed her eyes briefly. The room hummed around her. Good. Lucas hesitated. There's a request from Hale directly. He wants a meeting. In person. Olivia opened her eyes. Her gaze was sharp. Where? Here, Lucas said. Or anywhere you choose. She considered. The maps, the blinking lights, the long view. Then she nodded. Tomorrow morning. My office. He smiled. I'll arrange. Outside, night settled. The city lights came on, steady and indifferent. In Newfoundland, the stairs finally arrived. Passengers filed out into the cold, guided by weary staff. Cameras flashed. A local reporter caught Bradley Knox as he slipped on ice, hand flailing, cello case thumping. The clip went viral in minutes. Back in the command room, the final dependency dropped. The screen went quiet. Silence, thick and absolute. 100%, the engineer said. Olivia felt it then, the moment the system completed its arc. She rested her good hand on the console and let herself breathe. This was not the end. It was the hinge. Lucas looked at her. What happens when they sign? She turned toward the window. The city reflected faintly in the glass. When they understand, she said, that the rules apply even when it's inconvenient. He nodded. She added quietly, and when they remember the name of the woman they thought didn't belong in seat 1A. The screens continued to glow, waiting. Morning light cut across Olivia Carter's office in long, pale bands, catching the edges of glass and steel and turning them sharp. The city outside looked clean from this height, orderly, like systems behaved if you designed them correctly. She stood at the window, coffee untouched, shoulder-taped and immobilized beneath the hoodie she hadn't bothered to change out of. Pain was a steady companion now. Useful. It kept her focused. Lucas Bennett checked his watch. 10 minutes. She nodded without turning. Let them wait. Downstairs, the elevator doors opened to a hush. Raymond Hale stepped out first, jaw set, suit immaculate despite the sleepless night etched around his eyes. He carried a leather portfolio like a shield. Behind him came Bradley Knox, thinner somehow, posture tight, hands empty. No assistants, no entourage. Just two men stripped down to the essentials of who they were when power stopped answering their calls. Security guided them through the lobby and up. The doors opened again. This time, no hush. Just the low hum of a building that knew who was in charge. They entered the conference room and stopped. Olivia sat at the head of the table, back straight, hands folded, gaze level. The screens behind her displayed a single still image. Flight 802 on the tarmac, frost creeping along the wings. She did not stand. She did not offer a hand. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was even, unhurried. "Sit." Hale hesitated, then obeyed. Bradley followed, slower, eyes flicking to the image, then back to her face. He swallowed. Lucas took a seat to Olivia's right and slid a thin folder across the table. No pleasantries, no coffee, just paper. "We're here to resolve this," Hale began, leaning forward. "What happened on that aircraft was unacceptable. I take full responsibility on behalf of Skyline Airways. We are prepared to issue a comprehensive apology and—" "Stop," Olivia said softly. Hale froze mid-sentence. "This meeting is not for apologies," she continued. "Apologies are performances. This is for consequences." Bradley shifted. "Ms. Carter," he said, trying for calm. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Things got heated. Words were said. But this response, grounding an entire airline, this is disproportionate. Olivia looked at him for the first time since he entered. Really looked. His eyes darted, calculating angles that no longer existed. "Disproportionate," she repeated. "You used that word on the plane, too, when you suggested I should move because my presence made you uncomfortable." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Lucas slid another document forward. "Mr. Knox, this is notice of civil action. Assault, defamation, tortious interference with business relations. Damages are outlined on page 3. Bradley didn't touch it. He stared at Olivia, something like disbelief crossing his face. "You can't be serious." She tilted her head slightly. "I am very serious." Hale cleared his throat. "Olivia, let's not escalate. The board is willing to discuss revised terms, increased rates, extended exclusivity. We can make this right." She leaned back, eyes never leaving him. "Make it right how?" He hesitated. "By restoring service." A faint smile touched her mouth, then vanished. "You're still negotiating as if you're in a position to do so." The room tightened. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Lucas tapped the screen. "Skyline stock," he said calmly. "Down 60% since market open. Liquidity concerns flagged. Credit lines frozen pending outcome of this meeting." Hale's face drained. Bradley's knee bounced under the table. the movement betraying him. Olivia folded her hands again. "Let's talk about the plane." Hale blinked. "The plane?" "Seat 1A, she said. "The rules that allowed a captain to lie, a flight attendant to escalate, a passenger to insult, a system that backed them because it always had." Hale swallowed. "We have policies. Training. Training didn't stop any of them," she said. "It encouraged them. It told them whose comfort mattered and whose didn't. It told them who belonged." Bradley bristled. "That's not fair." She cut him off with a look. "Fairness is irrelevant. Outcomes are not." She turned to Lucas. "Read the terms." Lucas opened the folder. New contract rates tripled. 10-year exclusivity. Early termination penalty of $5 billion. Mandatory third-party ethics oversight. Public reporting requirements. Immediate personnel actions. Hale shook his head slowly. "The board will never approve that." "They will," Olivia said. "Or you will be explaining to shareholders why your fleet is grounded and your systems remain dark." Silence stretched. The clock on the wall ticked, loud as a metronome. Hale glanced at Bradley, then back at Olivia. "Personnel actions?" "Captain Reynolds is terminated for cause," Olivia said. "Pension forfeited. Lauren Mitchell is terminated and barred from any customer-facing role within your partners. A formal complaint will be filed regarding Officer Moore, and Skyline will support his removal from airport detail." Bradley stiffened. "What does that have to do with us?" "You incited the situation," she said. "You amplified it. You benefited from it. That makes it your responsibility." He leaned forward, voice rising. "This is extortion." She met his gaze, unblinking. "This is accountability." Lucas slid the final document forward. "Mr. Knox, separate from Skyline. This outlines your personal liability. $100 million. Bradley laughed. Brittle. "That's impossible." Olivia didn't look at him. "Lucas?" He tapped the screen again. "Montgomery Capital withdrew yesterday. Public pensions followed. Liquidity is gone. Insolvency proceedings imminent." Bradley's laughter cut off. He stared at the table, then at his hands. They trembled. Hale exhaled, long and ragged. "If we agree, services resume." "Within 1 hour of signatures," Olivia said. "Not before." Hale looked at the documents as if they might bite him. He picked up the pen. His hand shook. "Wait," Bradley said suddenly. "You can't do this. You're punishing everyone because you got embarrassed." Olivia stood. The chair slid back with a quiet scrape. She walked slowly around the table, the room tracking her movement. She stopped behind Bradley's chair and spoke close enough for him to feel it. "I was not embarrassed," she said. "I was assaulted. I was stripped of my rights in public. And you watched it happen and smiled." She moved back to her seat. "Sit down, Mr. Knox." He did. Hale signed. The pen left an indelible line. He pushed the papers across. "Done," he said quietly. Olivia picked them up, scanned once, then handed them to Lucas. "Restore services," she said. "Well." Lucas nodded and spoke into his phone. Do it. Across the globe, screens blinked back to life. Systems breathed, flights queued. Heat returned to cabins. In Newfoundland, a cheer went up as doors opened and buses rolled. In the conference room, no one cheered. Hale stood, exhausted. We'll issue the statement. She nodded. You will. Bradley remained seated. Security entered and paused behind him. Mr. Knox, Lucas said, you are no longer authorized to be here. Bradley looked up at Olivia, eyes wet. I'm sorry. She regarded him for a long moment. No, she said. You're just out of time. Security escorted him out. The door closed. The room felt larger. Hale lingered. He looked older now. We'll do better, he said, not entirely convincing himself. She met his gaze. You'll do differently. Better is optional. He left. Olivia turned back to the window. The city had shifted while they talked. Clouds breaking, light changing. Lucas approached quietly. You okay? She nodded once. Then softer, I will be. Outside, headlines updated, markets steadied, the world recalibrated. Inside, Olivia Carter stood alone with the view, the ache in her shoulder, and the knowledge that systems could be forced to learn. Seat 1. A had never been about the seat. It had been about who got to say no. The silence after power returned was different from the silence before. It wasn't relief. It was recalibration. Olivia felt it as she walked the corridor outside the conference room, the building settling back into its rhythms, screens humming, voices low and controlled. Systems were online again. Flights were moving. Markets had stopped bleeding. But nothing felt the same. It shouldn't have. Lucas matched her pace. Media wants a statement. They're circling. She shook her head. Not today. He nodded. We'll hold. They reached her office. The door closed softly behind them, shutting out the machinery of consequence. Olivia lowered herself into the chair by the window, careful with her shoulder. The pain had dulled into something constant, an ache that would linger long after headlines moved on. She welcomed it. It anchored her. Lucas remained standing. Internal Affairs confirmed Officer Moore has been suspended without pay. Criminal charges forthcoming. Excessive force. Civil rights violation. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. Good. He hesitated. There's more. Captain Reynolds retained counsel. He's claiming he acted under pressure, citing passenger safety. She opened her eyes. Safety is the excuse everyone reaches for when they've already decided who matters. Lucas allowed himself a thin smile. I'll respond accordingly. He left her then, quietly, understanding the moment. Olivia stayed by the window, watching the city move. Cars, pedestrians, ordinary lives intersecting with extraordinary systems they never thought about until they failed. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You destroyed everything. She didn't reply. Another buzz, then another. Some angry, some grateful. some incoherent. She turned the phone face down. Hours later, dusk crept in. The city softened. Lights came on one by one. Olivia finally stood and shrugged into her coat, wincing. She needed air. Outside, the building's security team straightened when they saw her. No one spoke. She walked past them into the cool evening, the sound of traffic grounding her. A reporter called her name from across the street. She kept walking. The car was waiting. As she slid into the back seat, her phone buzzed again. This time she looked. It was a link. The video, still climbing. Comments scrolling faster than she could read. A hero. About time. They all do this. She watched for a moment, then closed it. The internet would do what it did. Amplify. Distort. Forget. The system she cared about required longer memories. At home, she moved slowly, methodically. Changed clothes. Cleaned the scrape on her wrist where the cuff had bitten. The skin was bruised, angry. She traced it with a finger, then let her hand fall. Sleep came in fragments, dreams of narrow aisles and flashing lights, voices overlapping. She woke before dawn, heart steady, but alert. The city outside was still dark. Her phone rang at 5:30 in the morning. Lucas again. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. She sat up. "Talk." Bradley Knox didn't disappear quietly. He's threatening to countersue, claiming defamation, economic sabotage. She exhaled through her nose. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that he's desperate," Lucas said. "His attorneys are throwing paper at the wall. And Skyline, they're cooperating. Publicly. Privately, they're terrified. The board is restructuring leadership. Hale's position is unstable." Olivia leaned back against the headboard. "And Officer Moore. Arraignment is scheduled. Media will be there." She was silent for a moment. "I'll attend." Lucas paused. "Are you sure?" "Yes." The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant. Olivia sat in the back, unnoticed at first. No cameras allowed inside, but the air buzzed with attention. Officer Daniel Moore sat at the defense table in a suit that didn't quite fit, shoulders hunched. He looked smaller without the uniform, older. His hands were clasped tightly, knuckles white. The prosecutor laid out the facts with surgical precision. The video, the testimony, the injuries, the words you people entered into the record like a stain. Moore stared straight ahead. When his lawyer whispered, he nodded without looking. When the judge spoke, he swallowed hard. Olivia watched, detached but present. This wasn't triumph. It was exposure. At one point, Moore glanced back. Their eyes met. His held something she hadn't seen before. Not anger, not defiance. Fear. The realization that the system he'd relied on had turned its back. She didn't react. She didn't owe him that. Outside, reporters surged as the hearing adjourned. Microphones thrust forward. "Ms. Carter, do you feel vindicated?" She stopped, turned. "Vindication isn't the goal," she said. "Accountability is." Someone shouted another question. She raised a hand, gentle but firm. "I'm not here for commentary." She walked on. Days passed, then weeks. Skyline resumed operations under scrutiny. New training programs rolled out. Oversight committees formed. Statements issued. Promises made. Some would stick, some wouldn't. She knew that, too. Bradley Knox faded from headlines as his empire collapsed quietly. Asset sales, settlements, a cautionary tale for those who believed proximity to power was the same as power itself. Lauren Mitchell took a job out of state, away from airports. Captain Reynolds appealed, then withdrew. The 4 stripes meant nothing without trust. One afternoon, Olivia sat in her office reviewing a report when Lucas entered, something lighter in his step. "You might want to see this," he said, handing her a tablet. It was a letter, handwritten, from a woman in Ohio, 62, retired teacher. "I saw what happened to you," it read. "I've been moved from my seat before." I didn't say anything. I wish I had. "Thank you for saying no." Olivia read it twice, then once more. She set the tablet down carefully. This, she thought, was the part that mattered. Later, alone again, she stood by the window as rain began to fall, streaking the glass. The city blurred. She touched her shoulder absently, feeling the faint click that remained when she moved it just so. A reminder. The system had been forced to bend. Not because she was powerful, but because she had refused to disappear. Her phone buzzed, a calendar reminder. Flight to Tokyo. Commercial. She smiled, just slightly. There was still more to do. The terminal smelled the same as it always had. Recycled air, burnt coffee, floor cleaner. But Olivia felt the difference the moment she stepped through the sliding doors. It wasn't reverence. It wasn't fear. It was attention. The kind that lingers a second too long, recalibrating assumptions in real time. A man at the curb straightened when he recognized her. A TSA supervisor whispered into a radio. Somewhere down the concourse, a gate agent froze mid-sentence. Lucas walked beside her, hands in his coat pockets, scanning without scanning. "You sure about this?" She nodded. "Commercial." They passed security without ceremony. Shoes on, bag untouched. No apologies spoken out loud, though she felt them hovering in the air like ghosts. She didn't want apologies. She wanted the system to remember. At the gate, a young agent stood behind the counter, fingers trembling slightly as she typed. "Ms. Carter," she said, voice thin but polite. "We've pre-boarded you. The captain asked to welcome you personally." Olivia held up a hand. "That won't be necessary." The agent blinked. "Of course. Seat 1A is ready." Olivia looked at the boarding pass, then past the agent, down the waiting area. That's when she saw him. He stood near the windows, backpack slung over one shoulder, hoodie zipped halfway up, headphones hanging loose around his neck. Early 20s. Nervous energy in the way he kept checking his ticket, then the overhead bin space above his row. He shifted his weight, careful not to take up too much room. Like someone used to shrinking, she stopped walking. Lucas noticed. "What is it?" She didn't answer. She watched the young man glance up, eyes flicking toward her, recognition dawning. His posture stiffened. He looked down at his ticket again, then back at her, uncertainty etched across his face. Olivia turned toward the agent. "There's been a mistake." The agent's eyes widened. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Carter. What seems to be the issue?" Olivia stepped away from the counter and approached the young man. He straightened fully now, pulling his headphones off. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Marcus," he said. "Marcus Hill." She nodded. "Where are you headed?" "Tokyo. Finals week." He hesitated. "I'm in seat 4C. She glanced at the ticket in his hand. Then she took her own boarding pass and placed it on top of his. "You're in 1A today." Marcus stared at the ticket. His mouth opened, then closed. "I can't, that's first class. That's expensive." She smiled. "So is tuition." People nearby had gone quiet. Phones were already lifting, though no one said a word. "But where will you sit?" Marcus asked. She shrugged. "Somewhere else." He looked like he might argue. She met his eyes and shook her head once. "Go, before you talk yourself out of it." He walked down the jet bridge as if the ground might give way beneath him. The flight attendant at the door paused, then smiled warmly, taking his bag, ushering him forward. Marcus looked back once, eyes wide, and Olivia gave him a small nod. Lucas exhaled slowly. "You realize that will be everywhere?" She nodded. "Let it." She handed her boarding pass to the agent. "Change mine." The agent swallowed. "Of course. Row 4, aisle." Olivia made her way down the jet bridge, canvas bag in hand. The plane looked the same. The smell, the lighting. But the tension was gone, replaced by something tentative, watchful. She slid into the narrow seat, knees brushing the seat in front of her, and buckled in. The armrest felt too close. The space was tight, ordinary. She leaned back and closed her eyes. Up front, Marcus sat frozen in seat 1A, hands hovering over the armrests like he was afraid to touch them. The flight attendant placed a blanket over his legs, offered a drink. He nodded mutely. When the plane pushed back, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. As the engines roared, Olivia felt the familiar pressure sink her into the seat. The vibration traveled through the floor, through her bones. The shoulder twinged. She ignored it. A woman across the aisle leaned over. "Thank you," she said quietly. Olivia opened one eye. "For what?" "For reminding them," the woman said, "that we're allowed to take up space." Olivia nodded once and closed her eyes again. The flight settled into its rhythm. Lights dimmed. Conversations softened. Somewhere up front, champagne corks popped. Somewhere behind her, a child laughed. The plane leveled off. At cruising altitude, Olivia's phone buzzed zum Osud. A message from Lucas. "You're trending again." She didn't open it. Instead, she thought of the letter from Ohio, of the bench in the holding room, of the way systems resisted change until resistance became more extensive than adaptation. She thought of Marcus, sitting where she'd been told she didn't belong. When the plane landed in Tokyo hours later, Marcus waited until everyone else had disembarked. He stood at the exit, clutching his bag as Olivia approached from the back. "Thank you," he said. "I won't forget this." She smiled. "You shouldn't have to remember it as a favor." He nodded, eyes bright, and stepped into the terminal. Olivia followed, blending back into the flow of travelers. No escort, no fanfare. Just another passenger moving through a system that had learned, at least for now, to look twice. Outside, the city hummed, neon and rain and motion. Life going on. Olivia Carter adjusted the strap of her bag and walked forward, knowing the work was never really finished. But some days, progress looked like a young man sitting in seat 1A, believing he belonged there. The boardroom in Tokyo was quieter than Olivia expected. No grandstanding, no chest beating. Just a long table, muted city light filtering through smoked glass, and a dozen people who had learned very quickly how fragile systems could be. She took her seat without ceremony. The sling was gone now, but the stiffness in her shoulder remained, a faint reminder that never fully left. Across from her, executives adjusted papers they already knew by heart. They watched her with a new kind of attention, not deferential, not hostile. Calibrated. "We appreciate you making the trip," said Kenji Sato, head of regional operations. 60. Careful eyes. He inclined his head slightly. "After recent events, we thought it best to speak face to face." Olivia nodded. Face to face is where systems reveal themselves. A murmur moved around the table. Sato smiled faintly, acknowledging the truth in that. The agenda moved quickly. Shipping lanes, redundancy protocols, crisis response frameworks rewritten in real time. Olivia listened more than she spoke, asking questions that cut past surface assurances and landed where assumptions lived. "What happens," she asked at one point, "when someone at the bottom makes a decision that exposes a flaw at the top?" Silence. Then Sato answered carefully. "We correct the flaw." "How?" Olivia pressed. "By changing incentives," he said, "and consequences." She nodded. "Good." Hours later, the meeting adjourned. The work was solid. Not perfect. Never perfect. But honest. That mattered. Outside, rain streaked the glass again. Tokyo moved in layers, trains humming, foot traffic flowing with purpose. Olivia walked alone this time, letting the city absorb her. She felt the familiar pull of anonymity here, the relief of being just another face in motion. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lucas. "You have a visitor waiting when you return. Didn't want to tell them no." "Who?" she typed back. "You'll want to hear this one." Back in New York, 2 days later, Olivia stepped into her office to find a woman sitting near the window. Late 50s, grey streaks pulled back neatly, hands folded in her lap. She stood when Olivia entered. "Ms. Carter, thank you for seeing me. My name is Elaine Parker." Olivia gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Please." Elaine sat, smoothing her skirt. "I'm a compliance officer, formerly with Skyline Airways." "Formerly," Olivia noted. Elaine nodded. "I resigned last week." Olivia waited. "I spent 20 years flagging issues that never made it past middle management. Elaine continued. Disparate treatment complaints. Use of discretion that always leaned in one direction. Every time I pushed, I was told the same thing. We don't have the data. It's anecdotal. It's not systemic. She met Olivia's gaze. Until you. Olivia leaned back slightly. What are you asking? Permission, Elaine said. To tell the truth. Publicly. Internally. Wherever it needs to be told. Olivia studied her, the tension in her shoulders, the relief underneath it. You don't need my permission, she said. But you'll have my support. Elaine exhaled, something unclenching. Thank you. After she left, Lucas lingered in the doorway. You realize what you're building now. Olivia looked at the city beyond the glass. A record of accountability, she said. One they can't erase. Weeks passed, then months. The story faded from the front page, replaced by newer outrages, newer distractions. But the ripples remained. Airlines adjusted training protocols. Oversight bodies rewrote guidelines. Compliance departments gained teeth. Not everywhere, not evenly, but enough to notice. Officer Moore's case moved through the courts. Plea negotiations failed. He faced trial. Captain Reynolds took a consulting job far from cockpits. Lauren Mitchell disappeared from public view, her name a cautionary footnote in training manuals. Bradley Knox settled quietly. What remained of his fortune funded damages and silence. He avoided airports now, or so the rumors said. One afternoon, Olivia received another letter. This one from a man in Arizona. 71. Retired pilot. I flew for 30 years, it read. I saw good people that turn bad when no one checked them. I wish someone like you had been on one of my flights earlier. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer already half full. Late one evening, alone in the office, Olivia pulled up the original video again. Not out of obsession, out of calibration. She watched it without sound this time. The body language, the way authority clustered, the way dissent was framed as threat. She closed the file. The system would forget if allowed. That was its nature. Memory had to be enforced. Her phone buzzed again. A calendar reminder. Keynote. Transportation Ethics Summit. She almost declined. Almost. On the stage, weeks later, under bright lights, she looked out at an audience that spanned decades. Regulators, executives, union leaders, flight attendants, pilots, people who had built their identities inside systems they rarely questioned. She didn't tell the story the way they expected. No dramatics, no villain monologues, just facts, sequences, incentives. Power, she said, doesn't announce itself. It hides in procedures, in discretion, in who gets believed when stories conflict. The room was silent. She finished without applause. That came later, hesitant at first, then rising. Afterward, a young woman approached her backstage. Airline operations, early career, eyes bright with something like resolve. I didn't know we could say no, she said. Olivia smiled. Now you do. That night, flying home, Olivia sat in an aisle seat near the back. She liked it there. The view down the cabin. The sense of motion. A system working, for now. As the plane lifted, she rested her head against the window and watched the city fall away. She thought of Seat 1A, of who it belonged to, and of how belonging was not a gift, but a fact, whether the system recognized it or not. There was still work to do. She could feel it, steady and insistent, and she was not done yet. The courtroom was colder than Olivia expected, not in temperature, but in tone. Pale wood, hard benches, fluorescent lights that flattened every face into the same tired grey. Justice, she had learned, rarely looked dramatic. It looked procedural. She took a seat in the back row, unnoticed by most. No entourage, no statement. Just a dark coat, hair pulled back, posture straight. Her shoulder still clicked faintly when she moved it a certain way, a sound only she could hear. A reminder that this was not abstract. Officer Daniel Moore sat at the defense table. He wore a suit that hung awkwardly on him, the shoulders too broad, the sleeves a fraction too long. Without the uniform, without the badge, he looked exposed, smaller, human in a way the system had never required him to be before. The judge entered. Everyone rose. Everyone sat. The prosecutor began with the video. No sound at first, just motion. The grip on Olivia's arm, the twist, the stumble, the spill of papers across the aircraft floor. The courtroom watched in silence as the clip looped over and over, the way the internet had consumed it weeks earlier. Then the audio played. "You people always say that." A murmur moved through the gallery. Someone inhaled sharply. The prosecutor spoke calmly, methodically. Excessive force, violation of civil rights under color of law, failure to de-escalate, failure to assess, failure to see. Moore's attorney objected when the phrase, "you people," was repeated. The judge overruled. "Words matter," the judge said flatly. Olivia watched Moore's jaw tighten. His eyes stayed forward. When the prosecutor called her name as the injured party, she didn't move. She wasn't required to testify. The video spoke for her. A former training supervisor took the stand. He spoke about procedure, about threat assessment, about how quickly situations could escalate. The prosecutor asked one question that landed harder than the rest. Did Miss Carter display any physical aggression? The supervisor hesitated. No. Did she attempt to flee? No. Did she threaten the officer? Not that I saw. So why was force used? Silence. The defense tried to frame it as a mistake, a misunderstanding, a high-pressure environment, a young officer acting on incomplete information. Incomplete information, the prosecutor repeated, or incomplete humanity. The jury deliberated for hours. Olivia left the courtroom while they did. She walked the block slowly, feeling the city pulse around her. Traffic, sirens, a man selling pretzels on the corner. Life continuing, indifferent to the machinery inside that building. When she returned, the jury was filing back in. The foreperson stood, hands shaking slightly. On count 1, aggravated assault, guilty. A breath left the room all at once. On count 2, deprivation of civil rights under colour of law. Guilty. Moore's shoulders slumped. His attorney closed his eyes. The judge thanked the jury. Sentencing would come later. But the verdict was enough. As Moore was led away, cuffs replacing the badge that once protected him, he glanced back. Their eyes met one last time. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Whatever he might have said had arrived too late to matter. Outside, reporters surged again. Microphones, questions. Olivia raised a hand, not to stop them, but to steady the moment. This was not about one officer, she said. It's about the systems that trained him, protected him, and excused him. Today is one step, not the end. She walked away before they could ask more. Weeks later, another courtroom. This one quieter. Civil proceedings. Bradley Knox sat stiffly beside his attorneys, the arrogance burned out of him. Settlement documents slid across the table. Numbers that once would have impressed him now felt abstract, punitive. He signed without looking up. "I didn't know," he said suddenly, voice cracking. "About your company. About who you were." Olivia met his eyes. That was never the point. He nodded, defeated. "I see that now." She wasn't sure he did, but it no longer mattered. The settlement funded scholarships, legal aid, oversight initiatives. Money redirected from silence to structure. At Skyline Airways, changes took hold unevenly. New leadership, new language. Old habits resisted quietly, in corners where cameras didn't reach. Olivia knew better than to believe transformation was linear. But there were signs. A flight attendant emailed anonymously to say she'd intervened when a colleague tried to move a passenger for comfort reasons. A captain filed a report instead of issuing a command. A union demanded revised protocols in writing. Small shifts, but real. One afternoon, Olivia received an invitation to testify before a congressional subcommittee. Transportation and civil rights. She accepted. The hearing room was larger than the courtroom, more theatrical. Cameras everywhere. Lawmakers postured. Sound bites hovered. Olivia spoke anyway. She spoke about discretion, about how power flows downward until it pools at the feet of the most vulnerable, about how systems reward speed over care, authority over empathy. She spoke about Seat 1A, not as a luxury, but as a test. Who gets believed when conflict arises? Who is presumed legitimate? Who is framed as a problem to be removed? Some nodded. Some frowned. Some checked their phones. That was fine. Change didn't require unanimous understanding. It required enough. After the hearing, she sat alone in a quiet office, the adrenaline draining. Her shoulder ached more on days like this. She pressed a hand against it and breathed. Lucas knocked softly and entered. "You did good." She smiled faintly. "We did work." He sat across from her. "You know this will follow you forever." She nodded. "I know." Outside, winter edged toward spring. Snow melted into slush. Buds appeared stubbornly on bare branches. On a flight weeks later, Olivia boarded late, letting the rush pass. She took her aisle seat near the back and stowed her bag. A man across the aisle caught her eye and smiled nervously. "I saw the hearing," he said. "Thank you." She nodded, returning the smile. The engine spooled. The plane rolled. As it lifted, she felt the familiar press into her seat, the vibration of motion, the quiet miracle of coordination required to keep something this large in the air. Systems worked when designed to. They failed when allowed to drift. Olivia closed her eyes briefly, not to rest, but to listen. To the hum, to the balance, to the fragile agreement that held everything aloft. Justice, she had learned, was not a verdict. It was maintenance. The plane was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that came not from luxury, but from awareness. Olivia felt it as she moved down the aisle, the subtle pause in conversations, the way eyes lifted and then quickly looked away, recalibrating. Not fear, not reverence. Recognition. She slid into her seat without ceremony. Economy. Aisle. The same canvas bag at her feet. The same posture. Nothing about her signaled power except the way she occupied the space without apology. Outside the window, ground crew moved with practiced efficiency. Orange vests. Hand signals. Systems doing what systems were meant to do when accountability was built into them. The man beside her cleared his throat. Mid-60s, wedding band worn smooth. He glanced at her, then at the window, then back again. "I just wanted to say," he murmured, keeping his voice low. "My daughter flies alone now. After everything that happened, it matters." Olivia nodded once. "I'm glad." He smiled and looked forward again. No more was needed. As the plane pushed back, Olivia rested her head against the seat and let herself feel the motion. The shoulder still ached when she shifted. The click was still there, faint and persistent. A permanent reminder. Not of pain, but of cost. Cost was something she understood intimately. Weeks earlier, after the verdict, she'd stood alone in her office long after everyone else had gone home. The city lights had reflected back at her like constellations, each window a decision, each street a pathway. She'd thought then about how close everything had come to going differently, how easily the video might never have been uploaded, how smoothly the incident could have been buried under policy language and quiet settlements. Systems did not fail loudly at first. They failed politely, efficiently, with just enough justification to keep everyone comfortable. She had been uncomfortable. That had made all the difference. The plane leveled off. A flight attendant moved down the aisle, offering drinks. She stopped briefly at Olivia's row, hesitated, then smiled. Genuine, unforced. "Can I get you something?" "Water, please." The attendant nodded and returned moments later, careful not to rush, careful not to assume. Olivia noticed. The noticing mattered. Across the cabin, a young woman stood to retrieve her bag from the overhead bin, struggling slightly. A man reached up to help without being asked. Small gestures, unremarkable, except that once they might not have happened. At cruising altitude, Olivia opened her tablet and skimmed the latest reports. Oversight committees established, new training requirements, independent audits, not perfect, never perfect, but tangible. She closed the tablet and looked out the window again. Clouds stretched endlessly below, soft and deceptive. From this height, everything looked calm. She thought of Marcus, of the way his hands had hovered over the armrests in seat 1A, of the way his posture had changed when he realized no one was going to take the seat back. Belonging was not about permission. It was about presence. The plane began its descent hours later, city lights blooming beneath them. Olivia felt the familiar pressure shift as the engines throttled back. The moment always felt like transition, like something ending and beginning at the same time. When they landed, applause broke out spontaneously. Not the polite clapping of tourists, but something warmer, a release. As passengers disembarked, a woman a few rows ahead turned and caught Olivia's eye. She hesitated, then spoke. "You changed things," she said, "even if they don't say it out loud." Olivia smiled, small but sincere. "We all did." Outside the terminal, the night air was cool and sharp. Cars idled, drivers checked phones. The ordinary machinery of arrival. Olivia paused for a moment before stepping forward, letting the noise wash over her. She thought of the holding room, the cuffs, the way the system had expected her to shrink. She hadn't. That was the lesson that would outlast contracts and verdicts and headlines. Not that power existed, but that it could be challenged. That dignity was not granted by systems, but asserted by people who refused to disappear. Olivia adjusted the strap of her bag and walked into the crowd, just another traveler moving through a space that, slowly, reluctantly, had learned to see her. If this story stayed with you, if it made you pause, consider giving it a like and subscribing for more stories like this, and drop a comment with 3 words that stayed with you.